Hello and welcome to another episode of That Tech Show, the show that reveals the magicians behind the magic that is everyday technology.
Let's just roll with that. What accent was that?
It was Scottish.
Oh, right, okay, good. Well, I'm glad we clarified that. Are we going to be doing a different accent every time now, or is this a new thing we're trying?
No, I just thought I'd do something a bit different. That's all.
Oh, very nice. Well, so you've gone solo on this one, I believe, haven't you? So high level, who have we got on the show?
We have on the show Bailey and Reuben from a company who my company has a partnership with called Footprint Digital, and they're kind of an SEO agency. And they've built a tool that helps us become more sustainable. But I'll let you know a bit more detail after the catch up. I've just named that section.
The catch up, is that what we've called this? Oh, it's good that we've got a name for it. I've got some news. I rescued a dog this morning.
All right, Batman.
Yeah, I know. It's good, isn't it? I was taking my wife for a maneuver. She's had long COVID, and she has had real bad vocal problems for 2 years almost. And so I had to have a maneuver, a special vocal maneuver, an osteopathy vocal maneuver done. And on the way back, we were driving through London, and she noticed a dog on the side of the road. And so we stopped, and hundreds of people must have walked past this dog and spent 10 minutes capturing the dog. It did not want to be captured. I got bitten, which was nice.
By Nina.
No. Yeah, so I got bitten. We called the number on the collar, and a very posh bloke, because we were around the Kensington sort of area, came and collected the dog because he had a tradesperson in who'd left the door open. The dog had wandered off. So I'm glad we stopped and saved the dog. It wasn't just a random dog walking down the street. It was an owned dog. And so I've done my good deed for the day. Or we've collectively done our good deed for the day, the wife and I. So there we go. That's my update.
Oh, that's pretty good. That must have set you off on the right track for the rest of the day, feeling good for yourself, about yourself.
Yeah, I suppose I was hungry, so I think that sort of overshadowed it.
Oh. Well, it's nice to know that you've prioritized, the health and well-being of another living creature
over my stomach. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. And it's another exciting day coming up, because when this podcast goes out, I'll be waiting at Heathrow for my 3 Arabian rescue cats that are arriving. So It's a very animal-focused week for me. How about you, Sam?
Well, of course, this week was Easter weekend, and I went back to Wales
for
my nephew's christening and first birthday. And I've just realised. I mean, not that it matters, but his birthday's basically on Easter when Jesus died. Don't really know what the relevance of that is, but
well, is it Jesus dying or Jesus arising from the dead?
Well, he died, didn't he, on Friday and got back up again on Sunday? He was just tired.
Just got up, yeah, and that's why we have chocolate eggs.
Better crack on with this Jesus stuff.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, aside from that revelation, so it was a lot of kids throwing balls at my face. Like at one point, I mark easily. I bruise like a peach, and I was getting plastic balls from like a ball pit thrown at me. Because once you throw one or two, you think you're going to outdo the kids. Then you think, I'll tire them out. Yeah, I'll just keep throwing. For the rest of the day, for the time I was there, I was just getting balls thrown at my face, and I wish I took a photo. Actually, I had big red marks all over my face. I looked like a weird perverted Bobby, Mr. Blobby.
Do you know what? I thought you were going to say Mr. Blobby. That's funny. That's a blast from the past.
So yeah, and I was just, I got tired, and they were still going at it, and I'd be there with my beer, just like drinking it with like literally just balls flying at my face from all different directions. So it was quite entertaining.
We should definitely take that clip out of context.
Yeah, no context that tech show. Sounds like a Twitter channel. Yeah, so it was an entertaining and energetic weekend for myself, and I'm glad to be back now and back to work with a project that we're working on that has a very, very hard deadline. So I was back in work yesterday. So that's kind of my week.
Very good. Well, I hope you've had a good weekend too, listener. I hope you've had a pleasant Easter and you've not eaten too many chocolate eggs, which obviously has a great relevance to Easter, as we all know. And hopefully that rebirth has inspired you to listen to another episode of That Tech Show, this time focusing on the environment and a solo session for Sam, which was recorded fresh on Tuesday. So do you want to take us through a little bit more about who is on the show, what you talked about, and what people can look forward to coming up?
So, well, actually, just to preface all that is that it's World Earth Day tomorrow, because we are releasing this on Thursday, and I'm trying to do the maths, so it's World Earth Day tomorrow. This goes out on Thursday.
What? So are you saying it's going to be Friday?
It's going to be World Earth Day is going to be on
World Earth Day is
Friday, indeed.
Okay.
And this is what all this is in aid of. They've built a tool which inevitably goes and scrapes your website and crawls your website and tells you what the carbon footprint of your website is, which I think is a fantastic tool, and I think it's something that's slowly gaining a bit of momentum and becoming more aware of, and hopefully becomes like a standard practice for all those building websites. And Reuben and Bailey came onto the show. They're both from the marketing and the SEO team at Footprint Digital, which is a marketing agency based in and around London. And we kind of dig into what is sustainability, like what does it mean, and what are the different areas that are impacted by just having a slow and sluggish website, and by doing some of the things that their tool checks up on, what the impact of that is. So we dig into all that. Really, I learned loads from this, and I'm really, really inspired now to make it in my mission, because it's something that I can do to help the environment, and of something I'm responsible for. So I'm looking forward to taking the advice in this episode forward and helping spread the love in all the different kinds of channels that I do, as well as my work. So it's good.
Well, I'm looking forward to this one because I'm not on it. So I hope you, listener, enjoy this one as much as I'm going to.
Wonderful. Here is Reuben and Bailey.
Hey, my name's Bailey Bryan. I work at Footprint Digital. I'm on the business development team. So I'm generally the first port of call that you talk to, and a sustainable champion here at Footprint. So really excited to be here.
Hi, I'm Reuben Marshall. I also work at Footprint Digital as an SEO manager. So my day-to-day role is really working with clients to help improve their organic search rankings. But obviously here today to talk more about the digital carbon audit and what we've put together to help websites and businesses to be able to understand the impact that their website is having on the planet.
Wonderful. Well, we'll get into all that. But Bailey, I'm going to put you on the spot right now.
Let's go for it.
What is sustainability?
Gosh, well, I mean, that is such a big question. And that's why we're here today, because when we found out about the digital impacts in sustainability, we found that fact was just too much to fathom. About 2018, 2019, there was a study that came out that pretty much said that the internet is the equivalent to the aviation industry when it comes to carbon emissions. Now, that's just so hard to wrap your head around. And that number just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So instead of just being lost within that, we do what we do best. We needed to make these data points that were tangible and something that we can understand, because if we didn't know that digital world had a sustainable impact, then a lot of people don't know as well. And most importantly, probably our clients and day-to-day people. So we took it upon ourselves to start learning more about what a digital carbon footprint is, because I think everyone knows about sustainability and the impacts that, carbon has on the world, but having it tangible is something different. So we started doing a lot of research on our side, thinking about what we can do as a business first. So we started doing things about, 1% for the planet. We have a charity on our side where we are planting trees in Malawi, but we just knew that wasn't enough. That isn't going to reverse what the carbon emissions that are already happening. So, we started looking at things like, what was the impact of just one web page view? What does that carbon footprint look like? And we concluded that, the average page was about just under 2 grams of carbon. And from there, we wanted to find it more because that's just not enough. That's a small, minute amount. I think it's like the size of an almond per se. But if you're thinking about big e-commerce sites, if you're getting 10,000 views in a month, that just multiplies tenfold. And those are the impacts of, not only just an almond size, but the impact of, an entire person's carbon footprint for a year, heating homes for a whole year. And it just got bigger and bigger. And I think that was where our kind of education started from there.
Mm. How do you begin to measure that kind of things? Were you yourselves going out and getting those statistics and measuring them, or were they already there, first of all? And then, how do you even begin to fathom that kind of those statistics or get those statistics?
So, we are a data first company. We always want to make sure that the data is right and what we're looking at is right. So, we didn't take it upon ourselves. We went to other experts in this area. So, we were looking at energy providers. We were looking at university researchers. We were looking at the UK government. We were looking at what data was available for us to be able to find what it's called a carbon emission equivalent. Because if we think about what a digital carbon output is it's when energy is data is being transferred between centers, and that's generating a lot of heat. And I don't think a lot of people understand when they go on a website that, oh, I'm actually burning energy, or when I go on my phone, if I do one search and all of these things. And it is hard to quantify. So we needed to make sure that where we were getting this information was robust, first of all. And we also wanted to make it understandable. So, you could look at things like, we were looking at the weight of a tea bag, or how much carbon it takes to blow up a balloon, or even how much the weight of a hippo equivalent to a digital to your carbon emissions, because hippos are really important to us because, we have a book called Shoot the Hippo, How to Be a Killer Digital Marketer, but a hippo for us is the highest paid person's opinion. However, we came to realize that that may not be, it's not understandable. Of course, people know that a hippo is enormous, but what does that really mean? So then we started going back to things like, how many homes can you heat? Is this equivalent to your carbon footprint per year? Things that actually you feel like you can make a difference. And then we started looking into trees. How many trees can be planted so that you can start offsetting your emissions? Because we also wanted to be positive things, so that it's like, once you understand the impact of what your website's digital carbon impact is, then you can actually do things to change that. So if you know the weight of one web page view, you can actually be like, oh, maybe I'll do one less of that. Or if I know the weight of one email, so the weight of an email is about 4 grams. And there was a study that came out that said the most useless emails that get sent out are thanks, LOL, received, all these things that you don't need to say, and you're just giving out more carbon. And if you knew that, then maybe you would send one less email, or you would plant one more tree, so on and so forth, so that people actually felt like they could make an impact. Because the more conversations we were having, we realized that people who were interested in sustainability already were the ones who were ready to take that next step. So we needed to make sure that people felt like they had the power to do something about that. And eventually that got us into starting to think about, how can we empower our clients to understand, what, you can make a difference in this area too.
Yeah, I just wanted to also talk about the data point, because I think, as Bailey said, it's really crucial to ensure that we're going data first into this, and that we're looking at everything from a statistical standpoint and really from an objective standpoint. And there are studies that have looked into this in much more detail than we ever could. So there's a study out of Sweden, which we used quite extensively when building the tool, that measures the electricity usage of all different types of communication equipment, including Wi-Fi, kind of server hubs, your connection, all that sort of stuff. So we used a lot of information from there, and then also from a website called the Green Web Foundation, which has also looked into all of this as well. So we're able to kind of stand on the shoulders of giants, as it were, and use the research that's been done before us. But really our goal was to put it in an actionable and understandable way, as Bailey was saying.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's no point in reinventing the wheel, especially when the data's already out there, So then with that, so you mentioned email and you mentioned sort of web page load speeds and Wi-Fi's. I mean, is there a kind of definitive list of things that you considered, whether it's, again, take the Wi-Fi's, the web page load speeds and emails. What other aspects is your tool looking at to build a profile around?
So what the tool looks at is it uses those sort of baseline metrics for electricity usage for an individual web page, and it kind of just adds everything together. So we don't break it down by individual usages of the electricity, but what we do look more deeply into is the different parts of the web page, that are contributing. So, for example, we look at the different kind of parts of the site. So the HTML versus the JavaScript versus CSS, and then obviously images and video, which tend to be the largest parts of any given web page. And then what we also do is we look at the number of times someone visits those pages. So we're not just looking at this is the weight of your page from one user. We're looking at this is the weight of your page over a period of a year, and how much CO2 it's contributed. So that does throw up some interesting things, because what it might show is that, actually a smaller web page on your website, or one that you've already done some work on or minimize the images, for example, will actually have still the largest contribution to CO2 emissions, and therefore to climate change, even if it's not as large as other pages. So really what our goal was with that was to kind of prioritize and provide actionable points. So you can take our audit and find the individual pages and even down to the individual images that are causing issues, and then by optimizing those, reduce your carbon footprint.
Bailey, were you going to add something to that?
I guess it was just more at the beginning of how we were getting there, because you had asked the question of, we were thinking about web pages and we were thinking about emails. I guess as the more research we did, we realized that there are a lot of things out there, a lot of data points out there, but there was something that we as Footprint Digital could do to help. So we tried to kind of really streamline where we could help and what we could do to help, versus getting kind of lost in what feels like the inevitable of climate change, that we needed to figure out where we can make an impact, and a compounding impact at that. Because as Reuben was detailing out, even if there's a web page on your site that is quite reduced, but that's where you get the most traffic, you need to be understanding all the things that you could be doing to be minimizing that or guiding people there. So there were elements of web design that we're able to highlight and guide people to make changes on. But the more things that equated to a sustainable website, it also equated to an SEO friendly website. And that was really where the kind of light bulb moment was for us, and helping our clients realize, by focusing on good SEO when it comes to page speed, user experience, really good copy, all of this guides the user to find what they need easier and quicker. And so that also equates to less data being transferred between the sites. So all of this was coming into this really kind of holistic picture for us, where we were like, you know what, not only was this a passion project for us, because we're very into making the world a better place and where we can, and being 1% for the planet, doing all of these things, but now we have something where it's a business incentive for us to be able to elevate our clients and also just spread education like this, because, sustainability shouldn't be a dark art like SEO. We want people to know as much as they can, because we want people to be armed with this information so that they can make the changes too. But if we can be the people who help enlighten you and where your site can be making these positive changes and guide you to help make those changes, then we want to be those people.
I was just thinking about that sustainability question, Bailey, and what is sustainability? And obviously we're thinking of things from a digital sustainability standpoint, but I think obviously our goal, and what everyone's goal is to kind of keeping a livable planet, for our kids and for grandkids, to make sure that our work and our everyday lives don't lead to the destruction of nature and of, the livable world, and for everyone, not just obviously people where we live, but across the world. People are going to be more impacted by it in certain countries or certain areas where heat rises or water level rises are going to have a bigger impact.
No, you're absolutely right. And I feel like sometimes bracing that question, I can be a bit hesitant because it is such an open-ended question of like, what is sustainability and what is that impact? And I think when I became enlightened of the knowledge of the digital impacts, we have on the planet, it was just really hard to wrap my head around. So I tried to go straight into the digital sustainability aspect because, you're right. Like it really, the drive behind this started because of fear, realizing that this is inevitably kind of happening to us and what can we do to make that difference? Because it is scary, but I mean, every small step towards a sustainable future, it can make a big difference on a global scale.
You saw the most recent IPCC report where they were talking about how they're even laying out specific changes that need to be made. Otherwise, we're going to get an irreversible over 2-degree change. And it's like nothing's happened. And, we need to rely on our leaders to do things, but equally, we can do some things ourselves, whether it's eating less meat or trying to buy more sustainable clothing or things like that. But also, obviously, digital is one area that I think you're right. People have a big blind spot for and don't necessarily understand the impact that all of their digital activity has on the planet.
I was a web developer. I've been a web developer for nearly 20 years, and I'd never really thought about anything to do with, carbon footprint and all the rest of it, and how it's how what we do on the web has an impact, because it feels so efficient in a word, really. I don't know why but of course you've got servers, you've got data centers, you've got everything working towards, you're using electricity to surface a website. So why wouldn't there be a carbon footprint? Where do you think the interest has stemmed from with regards to carbon emissions and the web? Have you any insights into that, or if there is any catalyst to what triggered it in your mind, for instance?
I think the trigger for us was we had a few like climate advocates already within our company. So we had people who were already interested in it. And for us at Footprint, we're very much encouraged in a learning and growing environment. So these people on our team, went out to do climate advocacy, looking through, Al Gore's efforts as well as Greta Thunberg, and, these people with massive platforms, as well as like, the renewed interest in the Paris Agreement when the United States said they were going to come in and come out. I think people were realizing that a lot of things that were in there about climate change, and these are things that Reuben was kind of touching on, the impacts of sustainability on a global scale, some of it can seem irreversible, but there is a chance for us to be making these differences. And you touched on the fact that like you think that the internet is more efficient, and there is an argument to say that us being online is more efficient than people, commuting to work all of the time, going out to eat more often, all of these things. So, it's hard to still kind of quantify those differences at this stage. However, there is more information now about the impacts of a digital world. The pandemic, I think has proved more than ever that, the internet is integral to our lives. And in a sense, it's not becoming back to a normal world, and people aren't going to go back to work full time. We're always going to be online in some aspects, and we're getting more and more devices that are connected to the internet. These are all positive changes, but we also can't go in blindly thinking that this is the solution to everything. We need to know that everything we do on this planet does have an impact. And instead of being frightened by those types of things, we need to see if we can make differences. So, there's been studies by Deloitte of like consumer behavior, and they came out, I think about last year, of 1 in 3 customers have stopped working with or stopped purchasing from a brand or service because of sustainability concerns. That's a big impact. So as a business, you have an interest from a client perspective of all these things. And if customers are becoming more and more savvy about sustainability practices within your company, it's not going to be long until they find out about digital sustainability, because I'm pretty sure everyone in the world listens to this podcast. So they're going to hear this information. But people, it shouldn't just always be on people. Businesses are the ones that could make that big impact. Reuben was saying how, some site or some web pages can be the busiest ones on your site, and those could be your service pages or your home pages and things like that. If one in three of those customers decide to leave the page because it's not sustainable, that's one thing. But if you as the business make an impact from your website on your side, and then you can make way less carbon emissions because of the changes you made versus one customer deciding that.
Well, I'm very pleased to think that you think the whole world is listening to this podcast. I like to think so too, especially Norway. Big shout out to Norway. We
Go
have
on,
the stats. Yeah, I think with brands, particularly clothing, it's because it's tangible, isn't it? It's because you can feel the product. That's gone through across continents in some respects. It's because the web is so intangible, even down to the fact that Chris, our co-host, who's not with us today, so I went over his house and I helped him decorate his house. And one of the reasons why I feel so rewarded when I do something like that is because as a developer, I'm just writing code, and again, it just feels so intangible. Even though I'm building something, even though what I'm building can take weeks or even months or potentially even years, like a lot of work and cerebral energy is going into it. But again, it just doesn't feel tangible, even to me as a developer. And I think that's something to grasp. And going back to some of the analogies that you're trying to put forward with regards to the impact that people are having on just their everyday browsing and stuff like that, I think it sort of brings it into the real world. And it's so cool to see. Well, it's probably old news to you. How long have you been working on this tool?
Oh, Reuben.
Yeah, but I think probably from beginning to end, probably around 6 months, from sort of initial conceptual ideas behind it and sort of trying to understand the stats, all the way through to kind of having a finished product as it is. So yeah, it's been a reasonable amount of time, that we've been discussing it and kind of working on it. Now, I was just thinking, about that intangibility aspect of things. I think, there's been a lot of, slightly off topic, but a lot of conversation about crypto and crypto mining specifically, and how that uses, more electricity than countries. Like, I think it's more than Argentina. More electricity than the country of Argentina is used for crypto mining. That might not be right. You might want to fact check that before doing that. But people aren't aware, and this is kind of my point, that there's really an awareness gap between what people do on an everyday basis and the impact that it has on the planet. And I think you're right that is a gap that is exacerbated, or it's a larger gap for things like digital than it is for things like clothing. I think that clothing or other material things have been quite heavily talked about in terms of the impact that they have on the environment and also on people. We've had lots of television or YouTube documentaries about people that work in factories making Primark clothing or other types of clothing, and it's quite heavily spoken about. I don't want to get you done for libel. Other brands are available anyway. But for example, crypto, I think most people who are involved in crypto don't have any idea really about what it is. And it's the same with going on Facebook on your phone or whatever. You just tap on your little phone and get something up and don't think about everything that's going on behind it and what that all involves. So yeah, I think there's definitely, it feels less tangible, and there's an awareness gap, which means that people don't necessarily think about it too much. And it's not easy to find out about either. There's not a huge amount of information about what it is, and I don't think there's something that's been picked up by sort of you don't see the same level of media about it as you do other things. So yeah, maybe it's a time thing. I think over time people will start to become more aware of it, but it's relatively new. And as you say as well, like exciting, and feels so clean and efficient, and you don't get that, you don't get dirty fingers from tapping on your phone, as you would if you were, I don't know, shoveling coal or something.
It's an interesting analogy to draw against, but it works.
It has the same impact,
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it starts with the organizations and the businesses, I think, and where they can start to improve their technology. But where it's going to really, really shine, and I don't know whether you have any insights into this, but where it's going to really shine is when the everyday person is more aware of their carbon emissions from their digital footprint, basically. And ultimately that comes down to how is it going to save them money. Unfortunately, I think it's always going to be a very simple way to say, if you do this, then your bills are going to go down or something like that. And I don't know whether because you're obviously targeting organizations with the tool, which I'm keen to get into now, but like, is there anything the everyday person can, benefit from this at the moment? Because obviously they're not the ones writing code. Is it as impactful as saving money on their bills by being more aware of their carbon footprint?
For the everyday consumer, I think it's harder to quantify. I mean, inevitably, if you're using less data, you probably are saving money on your phone bills or your internet bills and things like that. But where they actually do have quantifiable impacts is more at the business level, and more of an interest from the business to be making these changes, not only just from a sustainability point of view. So, like we said, I think more consumers who are sustainability focused, there's enough information to say that these people are more geared towards making more ethical purchases or ethical decisions, despite the fact that it may cost more money or cost more time to find these things or whatever it may be to get to those things, because that's more important to them than, say, consumerism. Whereas from a business perspective, if you're 1 in 3 customers leaving your site isn't enough incentive, things like increasing your site speed, there's direct correlation in saying that if you increase your site speed by even something as minute by 0.1% speed, that could increase conversion rate by 8%. So there's a direct revenue plus right there for you to want to be increasing your site speed, which is also making your site more sustainable, less data transfer, and making it easier for people to get there. So it's really like a triple threat there.
Yeah. I sort of caught myself out a little bit by even saying that, because basically, rightly or wrongly, I'm a podcast host, so I put my opinions on the line here. But like, when I think about my everyday, I feel like I'm quite sustainable. I try and do my best for the environment. I try and use LEDs, blah, 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 all this kind of thing to try and lower my emissions as much as possible. I feel like I'm quite consciously aware, but as a consumer, I think, I can only do so much, and there's only so much of a limit that I can do. And then, I travel to Wales quite a lot, and we pass through a place called Port Talbot, and there's these massive factories there pumping out emissions, basically. And I always think like, I can only do my bit, but when I pass that factory and it's pumping out all this smog and all the rest of it, and the town is like covered in this stuff, sorry if you're from Port Talbot, but it's the factory is right next to the town, so it's quite common knowledge. When I think about that, and I need to have the same level of thinking when it comes to being a business who creates websites. Consumers are going to look to us to be the ones to make this way more sustainable. So, again, I feel like I just caught myself out in my own kind of confusion around that intangibility. But it's just, yeah, it is up to us, and I think that's something that, I'm hoping that the tool can help me out with.
There's a great book by a guy called Michael Berners-Lee, which is called How Bad Are Bananas? And in that book, he talks about basically this topic. So what is the climate impact of lots of different things, and what everyday things that you do, and what is the climate impact of those? Basically he says that in each year we use around 7 tons of CO2 every year as an individual, and that's going up every year because of all the new things that we're doing and the new technology in our lives. So I mean, definitely there's really interesting things in that. Obviously, it talks about how bad are bananas, but also just about what actually a ton of CO2 looks like, which is 120 gallons of gasoline, like 120 gallons of petrol. That's 1 ton of CO2 being burned. So if you can imagine what that looks like, every year 7 times, it starts to put into perspective just how much damage an individual does to the climate. And even though an individual might not be responsible for all of the things that they're doing or the climate impact of all the things that they do, and may try and minimize the impact, obviously anything that can be done to reduce that is really important. It's just scary, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say that, like, I actually low key get really freaked out about the amount of plastic that's being every time I throw some plastic away or whatever, like that, and strong winds and strong waves scared the crap out of me. I don't know why. It's a irrational fear, although it is scary.
No, we shouldn't have those burdens though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've been talking about sustainability, and we've dipped in and out of this tool that you've built, right? Let's talk a little bit more, actually about this tool. So if the viewer hasn't guessed, you guys have built a tool that does what?
So what we have put together is basically a system that allows us to find out the weight of your site as it is, so the page size, so how many bytes, kilobytes, megabytes it is, and about the hosting of your site, so whether it's hosted on a renewable or non-renewable platform. And then we can put all that information through our tool, and what that will do is spit out or give us information about what the biggest areas that you could. Well, firstly, it will tell us how much you're using, so how much CO2 are you producing per year based on the number of users that are going to your site and the size of the pages that you have. And then we can obviously see information about which pages are largest, which ones are smallest, that sort of thing. And then we can also find specific information about which aspects of your site or which factors are contributing the largest proportion of that CO2 emissions. So we can kind of find where are the opportunities that you can actually improve your website or optimize your website to reduce your carbon emissions. So that could be, something as simple as switching your hosting. So switching from a non-renewable hosting platform to a hosting platform which uses 100% renewable energy. That can make a big difference. That can make up to 5 to 10% on its own difference in the proportion of carbon emissions that your website is producing, or even more, depending on how many people come into your site. But then also looking more deeply into things like your image optimization, the kind of amount of unnecessary code that you might have on your page, so unnecessary HTML or JavaScript, which is very common on, for example, WordPress websites or e-commerce sites. You can have a lot of sort of leftover code that's not being used on every page that could be stripped out to reduce the load size. And also other factors, such as the size of your images or, the image formats as well. So changing from PNGs or JPEGs to new, like, next generation image formats like AVIF or WebP, which can save a big proportion. In fact, out of the tests that we've done so far, the biggest thing that people can do is change to new next generation image formats, which up to 30% savings just from making that change. So quite a big impact from that. And really the goal was to give people a way to visualize and understand better and create awareness around the amount of energy that their website's using and the amount of CO2 that's producing on average, and then to give them actionable and doable things that they can do to actually improve that and reduce the CO2 emissions from their site. So hopefully it's an all-inclusive tool from that aspect.
And I can see the correlation between SEO, those sorts of things you would do to improve your SEO, as well as the energy. I mean, it makes sense, of course, but things like the image usage, that's obviously something that I've always been told as a developer, compression, the right sizes, and all the rest of it. Again, but just not even thinking about it from an emission standpoint. It's quite cool to. Well, it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's just killing two birds with one stone,
And a lot of the things that come out of building a more sustainable website don't necessarily hinder the user experience as well, because I think some people, can flag like, oh, if we're reducing the size of our images or reducing, changing the format that it's in, that's not true. Some of the, Reuben and I have been doing research on the types of next gen image downloads that you could be doing, and it doesn't deflate the image quality whatsoever. You can still be building up a user experience. Just because you have a sustainable website doesn't mean it's going to be completely stripped back to something that's so plain that no one would enjoy it. Like, all of these things are aiding towards the user experience too.
I did a series recently around the different image formats, and they're getting so much better now. I think I noticed like the JPEG was something like, I don't know, 100, 150 kilobytes or something like that. And then the WebP one was something like 90. And then the AVIF one, I say AVIF. I noticed you said AVIF earlier, Reuben. I don't know which one it is.
Oh my God. We didn't know the right way to say it. I've said both.
Is it an acronym?
I think it is an acronym. I think so. It's in all caps, so I assume it is.
That's true, actually. Yeah, and then the AVIF or AVIF version was something like 5 kilobytes or something crazy. And I played around with the compression and whatever to try and get still looking crisp and great versus, obviously you can compress the hell out of it and have it as 1 kilobyte or something, but it'll look like crap. But yeah, there's these new image formats are a huge thing. And I think across the board, the image formats were a big aspect. What were the other biggest kind of areas that you found that people's websites suck in?
So yeah, the other common thing that happens is the size of images. So not just the type of format of the image, but the actual number of pixels or, the actual height of it. So, sometimes you can have an image that's sort of like 300 pixels tall in a size that's only 50 pixels tall, for example. So you've actually got an image that's 6 times too large, for example. You can also have issues to do with unused JavaScript and unused CSS. So this could happen a lot if you're using kind of like builder tools, or if your site's not kind of bespoke created, you end up with a lot of code that's sort of floating around that's not actually used for anything. We picked that up as something that if you were to remove that, so in this example we were talking about earlier, it would reduce the carbon emissions by 12% on each page. So it's a lot of weight there, a lot of kilobytes there that aren't actually being used for anything. So by removing that, it can really help things. And yeah, there's lots of other factors as well. Obviously, the hosting is one that people don't necessarily think about, and also things that help page speed more, often as well. So deferring off-screen code. So especially on mobile devices, making sure that images, for example, aren't preloading or loading as soon as the page loads, and only when the user actually looks at them. That reduces the size of the page load a lot during that initial process, and kind of increases the efficiency. So yeah, there's a number of different things.
Does it care about what technology you've written in, whether it's a React site, a PHP site, or anything like that?
Not specifically, but it will look at the factors that make that up. So if your website is more likely to, have poor image optimization, for example, it will highlight that as a thing, but it won't highlight the actual framework itself. It will it's more of the symptom rather than the underlying problem there. For that example,
yeah,
what the result of it needs to be really is to have a conversation with the developer that's built the site or is working on the site with the recommendations in mind, and talk about what can actually be done from the recommendations.
And with that tight correlation with SEO, was there anything that came out of it that was like, well, I suppose you might have already mentioned is the actual server itself. What other aspects are like unique that you found, or surprising that you found, that were contributors towards carbon emissions?
So it's all to do really with the size of your site. I suppose from an SEO aspect, the most surprising thing and it's sort of a new thing as well, is Core Web Vitals and how that is interacting with the speed of your site and how that interacts with your carbon emissions. So for those who don't know, Core Web Vitals are a new concept from Google, and they basically are a series of factors that measure the page experience or the user experience of your website, looking at page speed. So how quickly your website loads and how quickly it's sort of engageable by a user. And we found that by improving by reducing the weight of your site, improving your carbon emissions from your site, you're also directly interacting with those Core Web Vitals and improving those. And that can really help to not just improve the user experience on the site and how people interact with it, but have a direct, it's a direct ranking factor. So Google will rank your site better if you improve those things. So yeah, there's definitely a cross interaction there where the different factors engage with each other. And it was surprising just to see. As an example, we found that there's a case study by Google actually, and this company improved their page speed by 23% overall. And following that, they saw a 42% increase in mobile revenue. So yeah, there's definitely a much larger interaction with speed and CO2 emissions, and then to the revenue produced by the site. So yeah, it can be really great from that aspect.
It's often, again, rightly or wrongly, I'm a podcast host, I put my thoughts on the line, but like the one thing I always talk about when people speak about SEO, I know this is a very simplistic view, and I've learned recently from you guys actually around the real depth that SEO can get to. But ultimately, particularly for smaller budgets, I do talk about, people worry about SEO and they ask me what they can do and all the rest of it. And from a bare minimum standpoint, it's about user experience and helping and making a clean and simple to use website ultimately makes it more accessible, more SEO, and now I can say more eco-friendly. So thanks for that one. So it's really cool. How big of a site can this tool handle, and can it bypass like logins? Can it navigate past logins and look at dashboards and things like that?
It can, as long as those areas are crawlable with our tools. So we use a crawler. So yeah, basically it's a tool that jumps from web page to web page, link to link, and finds out all the information about the pages that it can access. And within that tool, we can add settings that allow you to log in, past password screens. We can go into any area that we can provide it access to, essentially. So yes, definitely it can. What I would say is that from an SEO aspect, Google doesn't look behind password screens. So if you're mainly focused on improving the SEO of your site or improving the areas that users can access from Google, then that won't help, but it will help your carbon emissions in general.
I'm dead curious, actually. What you mentioned, a hosting service, eco-friendly hosting service. What is an eco-friendly? Well, I know what an eco-friendly hosting service is, but who is an eco-friendly hosting service?
There's plenty actually. You can do a Google search, and quite a few of them come up. Some of them are better than others. So some of them, what you'll find is that they're not actually using renewable energy, but they're planting trees, or I can't remember the word, but you know what I mean. They're like
offsetting their carbon emissions.
Yeah, offsetting, which I'm unsure about how good that actually is.
The more you dig into that, I guess the more convoluted it can become, because especially when it comes to offsetting trees, of course you should be planting trees, and there is a lot of facts around trees absorbing carbon. However, it goes into the more granular details of the average tree. It needs to be at a mature age. You need to be planting trees that are native to the land that you're planting them in. So if you're really wanting to get in the granular details of how much carbon you're going to be offsetting, it's, you should have been planting those trees 20 years ago. But, there's still an argument to say that you should be doing those types of things to preempt those in the future. But it does become hard to say how much of their carbon is actually being absorbed for those emissions at this exact time.
Yeah, what I would recommend for anyone that's looking into that is to do your research and try and work out what's best for you. There are kind of aggregator sites that will give you information about all the different possible hosters. I'm not sure that's the right phrase, but all the
hosting
different
services.
Yeah, exactly. All the different companies that you can use, and they'll lay out all the different factors and the different aspects. So obviously, you have to pick one that's not going to be prohibitively expensive, or doesn't provide the right level of support, or won't allow the number of users that you need to come to the site, while also being as carbon friendly as possible. But yeah, definitely one that uses green energy rather than carbon offsetting is the way to go.
Yeah. Again, it's just me learning, because I didn't know how a hosting service can be green, but it's not down to the technology, and it's just how they're sourcing their energy from. Really, ultimately, is the most effective way.
Yeah, it's similar to how people are switching their energy providers recently. There are lots of companies now that are using renewable energy sources, and you can do the same for your website.
Speaking of the planting trees, you reminded me as well. Like, there's a couple of tools that have popped up in my peripherals. Like, I use Ecosia, which is a search engine that for every search it plants a tree. I don't know, that's probably a seed. I've probably planted a pack of seeds in my search usage on that. So that's kind of cool, I guess. But you're right.
Yeah, no, it's not bad, of course. Like, you should be doing it. However, if it's doing the carbon for that exact year is hard to say.
What's great about Ecosia is that they plant trees in areas that have been deforested, and they plant native trees. So they're it's sort of a reforestation thing rather than planting trees for plantations, which is sometimes what happens. And then within 20 years, those trees are chopped down and made into houses or into something else anyway, which doesn't really actually offset much carbon. So, but yeah, Ecosia is great.
The energy it takes to get to that place and plant, and all the rest of it. But again, it's just a start. And there's also there was a video sort of chat service that came up as well, and it wasn't very good, basically, and it's early days for this kind of things, and people are doing their bit. So it's whatever we can do to support, but.
Of course. I mean, these tools are essentially saying, like, they're doing the awareness job. These are the type, like those search engines, those offsetting companies, they're the pioneers in helping people actually understand that their digital impact has a CO2 impact. So, they're not perfect, but it's bringing up that awareness that people need to know, that it gets back to that consumer level, so people can actually be like, whoa, all right, we need to do something about this. And NFTs are becoming more a part of our world. The metaverse is becoming more of our world. People are working online more. Digital is only going to increase. So if we can boost the awareness and change now before it becomes irreversible, then everyone should be doing their little bit of that part to get there.
So back on the tool then, how often would you recommend this be used by companies? Is it a weekly thing? Is it a monthly thing? Is it every single rollout? Like, is there an API that you can integrate with, like on your build pipeline or anything like that?
Yeah, I just know that there's some plans, isn't there, for like badges and stuff like that. So I don't know if we can talk about that in a second. But I mean, from a tech perspective, I don't think it needs to be done sort of every week or every month. It's more of like a project thing. So we can run the tool, run the system, find out the recommendations for you, work out where your site is and how much it's producing, where the savings are, and then go ahead and work on it. So, either work with us or with your developer or yourself if you're that way inclined and able to get in and make those changes, and then come back to us in 6 weeks, or, we can continue, monitor things all the time. But and then we can take a look at things after that project's completed and say, yeah, well done, you've actually reduced your carbon emissions by 30% or something, and that's a totally doable amount as well. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily it's not something you can do every day, because it is a manual process to go in from our side to put everything together. But yeah, it's definitely more of like a start and end of a project to see how far you've come.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Because I mean, from a developer point of view as well, it's going to take time for you to actually implement all of those changes. A lot of them is a lot of manual and time. So you want to make sure not only do you allow time to do the work, but also enough time to see the kind of changes that have been made. We were toying with the ideas of a 6 months from the first audit to the next one to be able to see how much impact you've had for, seeing all those users and how much has been reduced of the amount of users that are coming to the site as well, or not the reduced amount of users, but the reduced amount of data based on the amount of users that are coming to the site too. So you can actually see a quantifiable difference between the two.
And is that taking into account your visitor usage as well, or is it just looking at the static technologies that exist?
It takes into account the visitor usage. So as part of the initial setup, we obviously find the weight of every page and then see how many users have been to that page over the last year. So if on a second, check, we found that the number of users that come into your site has increased, then it obviously the total amount of CO2 being produced by your website will change, but the percentages per page or per factor will still have increased or decreased. So we can kind of look at it both ways, but we do look at how many actual visitors go to your website every year to as part of that initial call.
Yeah. And you mentioned these badges. These sound exciting.
Well, I mean, inevitably, we want people to be encouraged to make their sites more green, but also be recognized for making that change. If we're going back to customers having a choice of working with or purchasing from someone that's more sustainable versus someone who's not, it's allowing them to have that knowledge to be like, hey, we're making a change to make sure that your experience on our website is as sustainable as possible. And that can help put the incentive up. We also mentioned the Green Web Foundation, where you can do renewable, or you can find green web hosters. They offer badges too. So when you come to a website, you can see if someone is using renewable web hosting. And then as well, with our badge, we're hoping that people can also recognize if you are making an impact on individual pages of the website too.
So that's something I can put at the bottom of my website, basically, that says this has been recognized, or this has a
digital carbon champion. Yeah. So we've done a couple of beta testing, but we want to make sure that when we're doing this, we're figuring out the exact benchmark. So, we're hoping that there will be stages in terms of like people who make either, like a 50% reduction in CO2 emissions to their site, or a 25% reduction, or a 10%. We need to figure out what that looks like, because obviously it depends on the size of the website, how many visitors you're having, and all of those factors in order to make that kind of benchmark. So at this stage, we're trying to see, how much change people can make in that amount of time. And then from there, award it based on that. But I think as of right now, we're just hoping to provide badges so that people who do make that change are recognized for making a positive change.
I mean, it sounds great. And so this tool is actually out on Friday, which, if everything goes smoothly, this podcast will be going out a day earlier than when the tool is available. It's definitely going out, right? You're not going to promise us.
Oh, it's definitely going out. It's out on Earth Day, of course.
It is. I was going to say it's Earth Day, so what better day to be announcing such a great tool?
Carefully planned.
And where can people go to use this tool?
They can come to our website, or they can get in touch with me directly, or anyone on the team, really. We have a number of people who are very much happy to talk about this, but I think the best place would probably be on our website or our LinkedIn and Instagram. All of those places will be a lot of information of how you can get in touch about it, whether you want to have an initial consultation or you're ready to jump right into it and get your site audited. We're pretty much starting from Friday, so definitely get in touch with one of us.
Absolutely. And I'm excited. I'm super excited that this is actually something I can take on myself. I'm now responsible for the work, that the things that I do. I can actually have an impact on the work that my company can produce. So that almost feels very empowering, because, like I said earlier, but every time I pass Port Talbot, I think, geez, I'm not doing anything at all when it comes to carbon emissions, really. I'm such a small percentage as a consumer. But now that I'm on the other end of that as being a supplier, or I don't know what you'd call them, but as a business, there's a certain amount of empowerment, and I hope people can recognize that who are in my industry, and that can. I'll certainly be screaming and shouting about it. You tell me, well, if this podcast doesn't do enough, I'll definitely be making a noise about it. So I'm now really, really excited to be a part of it.
And from your perspective as a web developer, it's way more sustainable to be making changes on websites that, you've already created, and of course the ideal scenario would be making a more sustainable website from the get-go. But, there are lots of changes that we could be making on websites that are already created that will minimize our carbon emissions. So there's a lot you could be doing on people that you already have as clients now.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you can retroactively do this, and it's not something that, you have to build as part of the...
No, you don't have to start over. No.
Yeah. I'm almost, obviously some projects have been and gone, and the contracts are signed and the checks have been paid and all the rest of checks. Where am I from? When am I from? Jesus. The checks are signed. What are checks? But it's definitely something I feel, again, empowered to go back over some of my previous jobs, previous websites that we've built, and say, look, I've run this test on the website. I just wanted to let you know these are some of the ways that you can improve your carbon footprint with the site that we built. I hope this is helpful. So that might be a way that, just because you've signed the checks or they've signed the checks, like it might be something that our listeners, if they have businesses and they're building websites, that's something they can think about doing as well. Just and getting in contact, striking up a conversation about it. It's definitely cool. I think that was super insightful. Like, I'm now going away a better citizen, I believe, and I'm super excited to learn more and to use this tool. I think it's going to be a real eye opener for people to realize that their websites, no matter how simple or whatever they are, that there's more that they could be doing in terms of the carbon footprint. And I look forward to seeing the impact of this tool as well. So with that, I thank you so much, both of you, so much for being on the show and sharing more about sustainability and the tool that Footprint are building. We'll obviously leave links to everything because we've mentioned a few things right now, a few pieces of reading material to go away and look at. What was the bananas and hippos, basically the two books that I picked up on.
Yeah, exactly.
But we'll leave links to everything. So once again, thank you both so much for being on the show. I hope there's more that we can be sharing, particularly as the tool grows, and maybe we can have you back on the show. But yeah, I look forward to seeing the tool.
Thanks so much. It's been really fun.
Thank you for having us.
Do you enjoy that?
Yeah, I did enjoy it. It was lovely.
Great. I honestly, like I say, I learned so much. It was so insightful, and kind of, like I say, I feel personally, and I hope the listeners can feel, well, depending on what industry they are, we're in the tech industry after all, I hope they can feel a certain amount of ownership when it comes to digital sustainability, because we are responsible for this. We aren't hopefully aren't the consumers. Well, not hopefully, sorry. We aren't the consumers in this instance. We are the businesses and the authorities that can actually have an impact on people's carbon footprints.
So thanks to the guys from Footprint for joining us. Thank you, Sam, for hosting that on your own whilst I was out rescuing dogs. And thank you, listener, for listening to this particular episode. And so next week, I think we've announced this 3 times now because we keep putting it off. We're just trying to build up a little bit of a bit of a vibe, a bit of suspense for Anders Andreen, who's the CEO of Urbanista Headphones, who will be talking to us. He will eventually be talking to us about their new solar-powered headphones from Urbanista. It's actually a really great talk, and I'm really looking forward for you to be able to hear it. We've just sort of, had to hold it back for all these exciting things we've done recently.
Wonderful. Well, we'll see you all next week. Thanks once again for joining us. And as always, please do let us know in the comments what you thought of this episode. What was your favorite part? What did you learn from this episode? What could you be doing to help improve yours and others' digital carbon footprint?
And do go and give us a 5-star review as well. We're on a sort of 5-star review amnesty at the moment. Bring out all your 5-star reviews and we won't say anything. And also, chip in a shekel as well. If you want to go to buy me a coffee and drop us a couple of quid, then that will help with the editing costs and all of that funky stuff that means that we can put these episodes out for you.
Wonderful. We'll see you next week.
Bye.